war is being waged. A war between right and wrong, light and darkness, life and death, good and evil. And the theatre for this war is none other than the Holy Land. In this war, like any other, there are casualties. Carcasses of the blameless and the terrorist, lining the makeshift pathways and corridors of ruined and rubble-filled streets, where once shop owners and customers did business, swapped stories, and laughed. No more. Yet for all the desolation, the helpless and hungry children, one casualty has gone unnoticed, unseen. "What is truth?" said Pilate, as truth stared him in the face. At least, Pilate asked. Like so many other words, truth has become but a word, lost and debased, devoid of meaning and detached of content. Words like war, genocide, resistance, proportionate response, starvation, ethnic cleansing, murder, Holocaust. Misuse words in made-up narratives, their true meaning swept away like grains of sand under wave after wave of vile and empty rhetoric. And yet, said the man from Nazareth, my words will never pass away. Truth, so easy to say, but not so easy to live. Plato compared it to the light of the sun in his famous work, The Republic. In one episode, he places the journey from the darkness of ignorance to the enlightenment of truth in the story of the cave. Mankind, deprived of reason and truth, is portrayed as a group of people seated on benches in a dark cave facing a wall. The only source of light in the cavern is a fire behind the cave dwellers. As the flames blaze, puppets on a string are passed from one end of a line to another and project shadows onto the wall. The men seated at the wall cannot see the puppets, and they believe the puppets' shadows to be people, until one day one of them turns around to see the charade. No longer content to live in this false reality, he leaves his place and finds the cave mouth. He sees the sun for the first time. His eyes hurt, much as the truth may hurt those steeped in deception. But as his eyes adjust, he eventually sees how truly awesome reality is. He can never go back to the cave, except, perhaps, to free or enlighten his fellow human beings. Plato regarded the person who saw the light as the philosopher, whose vocation it was to enlighten his fellow man. But not everyone was content to leave the security of their false reality. Some would never come out of darkness. The Jews placed the burden of the truth-teller in the lives and works of the prophets, whose rebukes and exhortations were often roundly rejected by the more worldly and usurpacious tyrannical kings. The prophets used stories and poems to call the people of Israel back to the true path. The Bible is full of stories, the Torah or Pentateuch, often referred to as the law but more properly understood as a way of conversion, the Teshuvah, the way back to God. The Canadian psychologist and commentator Jordan Peterson points out that while we regard ourselves as rational thinking beings, for the most part we are in fact anything but scientific or rationalistic. Not even scientists think scientifically most of the time, says Peterson. When you look at a key, you don't start analysing its constituent elements or characteristics. You see rather a tool, something to open a door. We see the value of the object rather than the object for what it is. If we scale that up to the level of interpersonal relationships, you could say we view other people and our relationships with them in terms of values. Cue morality, cue religion, cue mythos. Since the dawn of abstract thought, human beings have used the idiom of story to confront the bigger questions. Over eons, cultures that thrive have articulated the values that made them succeed in the form of archetypical stories: the hero's journey, the Oedipal mother, St. George and the dragon, and the plethora of other children's fairy tales that have come down to us through the ages. These stories are deeply instantiated into our psyche, intertwined with our neurological and dopaminergic systems. A quote from Google Gemini on the topic: "Great stories stimulate dopaminergic neurons in the brain, which are linked to reward, novelty, and memory. As a story unfolds and introduces new information or creates suspense, this unpredictability can trigger a dopamine release, promoting learning and memory. The brain releases dopamine in anticipation of resolving unanswered questions or when the hero achieves a success, creating a positive feeling that can enhance memory retention and engagement with the narrative. End quote. But even in our daily lives, we operate within the conceptual framework of narrative. I met my husband, we fell in love, we got married, we had children. It's a story, a love story with a happy ending. Narratives inform our decisions from what to study, to what job to take, to whom we should marry. They give meaning to the everyday struggle, from the school run to decisions about investing in a property or buying a house. It's a story, a narrative, informed by values. We act out these values in a way that inculcates them into the next generation. Everything we do to a greater or lesser degree is informed by story. Narrative regulates our lives, our mood, our mental state. My husband cheated on me. The above narrative is shattered. The story I have told myself has fallen apart. The schema, or the mental framework or cognitive structure that organises information, thus allowing us to make sense of the world and guide our thinking and our behaviour, has been shattered. A new story will have to take its place. Is the relationship over? It will never be the same. But will it heal and become deeper through reconciliation? Or will I move on and find a completely different life? Whatever the case may be, the change, the crisis will take time to get through. Like the man in the cave who leaves the false reality behind, it will take time for his eyes to adjust to the light. St. Paul was such a one. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? The great evangelist, by his own account, was more zealous for the purity of the Jewish law than any of his contemporaries. What stories animated him as he pounded the road to Damascus? Perhaps the story of Elijah and the 400 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, whose sacrifice remained while Elijah's was consumed by the fire of the living God of Israel. Was it one of the stories from the book of Maccabees, the 7 sons and the mother who die willingly for the preservation and honour of the Torah? Or the story of Judas Maccabeus himself? Or the 3 young men in the heart of the fire in the book of the prophet Daniel? Who knows? But the encounter with the One on the road to Damascus must have sent Paul into a psychological tailspin. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Of course, Paul had received a grace given to him for a purpose. He's baptized and receives his sight, but the seismic schematic shift that has occurred in his understanding of the world, his hierarchy of values that orders the way his mind organises information, has been turned upside down, such that for all his learning he will stay in Arabia and Damascus for years before finally meeting the other apostles. Paul needed time. The same could be said of the late conservative writer and commentator David Horowitz. Born into an ideologically communist family in New York, Horowitz believed the government perniciously targeted blacks and other minority groups in America. But the cataracts fell when a friend of his in the Black Panther Party was killed by people within the movement. The episode happened at around the time the Communist Party in China were killing millions of Indo-Chinese peasants in Vietnam. The lack of protest on the part of the left at this human rights atrocity, and the extraordinary murder of his friend at the hands of the Panthers, induced Horowitz into a crisis of meaning, a seismic schematic shift, out of which he emerged changed. His worldview was now that of a meritocratic conservative. I went into a serious personal crisis. I was, I think, clinically depressed for 7 years, but in that crisis I tried to rethink everything, including my attitude towards America. In reality, nothing had changed. The Communist Party and left-wing ideologues and conservatives with their values were the same as before. But the pain caused by a personal tragic event forced Horowitz to dismantle the narrative through which he evaluated the world and ordered his values and thinking. And now we come to the crux of this episode. The way the Irish populace constantly interprets the Hamas-Israeli conflict reminds me of that fighting scene from Robin Hood, Men in Tights. There is a close-up of Robin Hood's blind friend Blinken duelling. He's sweating and panting heavily as he relentlessly swings his sword in a duel to the death. As the camera recedes, we see that Blinken's enemy is in fact a wooden beam. It's a funny little shot, but unfortunately for the Irish, it is a fitting analogy for our view of Israel and the IDF. We envision Israel as this monstrous force for evil, but like Blinken and his inimical wooden beam, the real monster is somewhere else. We allow our politicians and media to slander Israel and virtue signal by bragging in the media of their success in allowing Gazans into our country allegedly in pursuit of education, while greater evils gather on the horizon. Homelessness, drug abuse, unchecked illegal immigration, rising crime rates, etc. And we are no more susceptible to the truth than blind Blinken to the real enemy. I could tell you fact after fact, beginning with the ratio of civilian to legitimate target deaths, 1.5 to 1, the lowest of any urban war. Particularly striking also when we consider that Hamas uses human shields in a way and on a scale that no other terrorist or military organisation of any kind has ever done. And yet Israel have managed to keep civilian deaths to a shockingly low number. Yet we say the IDF targets civilians. Again, never in the history of human warfare has the burden of feeding the civilian population of one side been placed on the opposing side. On the contrary, throughout the history of warfare, starving a civilian population was a standard military strategy. Yet at the time of writing, Israel has facilitated and or directly given something in the region of 2 million tons of food and other vital supplies to the citizens of Gaza. Frustrated by the UN's inability to manage aid properly, i.e. giving aid straight to Hamas, who then resell the food at extortionate prices on the black market after helping themselves to it, the IDF chose to back the American company GHL in distributing food to ensure that Gazans who need the food actually get it. And yet we accuse Israel of starving Gaza. In Israel, Jews, Arabs and Christians and other minorities enjoy all the freedoms and protections of the law as much as any other Western state. Yet we say that Israel is an apartheid, and the list goes on. It doesn't matter. When it comes to Israel, we're happily, mindlessly and willfully ignorant. We can all agree on our fictional enemy in a narrative we have made of whole cloth. My question is, what will it take for the Irish to see the truth? What event or tragedy lies ahead of our country for us to finally tell the good guys from the bad guys? What precipitous crisis will precede the cataracts of a false and misleading narrative to fall away, and for the truth to appear in all its painful and splendid glory? God only knows.
If I